Welcome, dear listeners, to another chilling episode of them. Tonight, we unravel the eerie and unexplainable occurrences within the opulent walls of the Ritz-Carlton Hotel in Boston, USA. This is not just a tale of luxury and grandeur, but one of inexplicable time slips that transport unsuspecting guests into bygone eras. Imagine checking into a hotel room, expecting comfort and modern amenities, only to find yourself suddenly surrounded by the sights, sounds, and people of a different time. The elegant chandeliers, the vintage attire, the antique decor. It all feels so real, so tangible.
But then, the realization hits you. This isn't some elaborate reenactment or a dream. You've been transported, ripped from the present, and thrust into the past. The fear, the disorientation, the overwhelming sense of being lost in time. It's almost too much to bear.
Yet, amid the terror and confusion, there is something strangely captivating about these time slips. They offer a glimpse into history, a chance to witness moments long gone, and perhaps a way to understand the true essence of the Ritz-Carlton Hotel. So gather close and listen carefully as we delve into the mysterious time slips of the Ritz-Carlton Hotel. Prepare yourselves for a journey through time that will leave you questioning the very fabric of reality. Our story begins with a weary businessman, Mr. Thomas Hargrove, who checked into the Ritz-Carlton Hotel on a cold winter night. He was no stranger to luxury hotels, but something about the Ritz-Carlton's timeless elegance left him in awe.
That night, after a long day of meetings, Thomas retired to his room. As he drifted off to sleep, an unsettling chill enveloped him. He awoke to the faint sounds of jazz music and laughter echoing through the halls. Confused and disoriented, he stepped out of his room, only to find himself in a bustling ballroom, surrounded by guests in 1920s attire.
Thomas tried to rationalize what he was seeing. A themed event, perhaps, but the details were too perfect, too vivid. The smell of cigar smoke, the clinking of glasses, the vibrant conversations all felt disturbingly real. He approached a nearby guest, a woman in a flapper dress, and asked, "What year is it?" She laughed, thinking it was a joke, and replied, "Why, it's 1925, of course."
Panic set in as Thomas realized this was no prank. He frantically searched for an exit, hoping to escape this nightmare. His heart raced, his breath quickened, and a sense of dread washed over him.
Just as suddenly as it began, the music faded, the laughter ceased, and Thomas found himself back in the quiet, modern hallway of the Ritz-Carlton. He was trembling, drenched in sweat, unable to comprehend what had just occurred. Thomas never spoke of that night to anyone, but the fear lingered, haunting him in his dreams. The experience left a scar, a reminder of the inexplicable encounter that shattered his perception of reality. Yet, his story is just the beginning. For the Ritz-Carlton holds many secrets, and those who stay within its walls may find themselves slipping through the sands of time, into eras long past. Stay tuned, dear listeners, as we delve deeper into the mysterious time slips of the Ritz-Carlton Hotel. next tale involves a newlywed couple, Emma and Jack, who chose the Ritz-Carlton for their honeymoon, drawn by its historic charm and promise of a romantic getaway. Their first night was perfect. A candlelit dinner, a stroll through the elegant corridors, and finally, they retired to their room, basking in the afterglow of their special day. But the Ritz-Carlton had other plans for them.
In the early hours of the morning, Emma woke to the sound of soft music playing outside their door. Curious and slightly uneasy, she nudged Jack awake. Together, they ventured out, hand in hand, only to find themselves in a bustling dining hall from the 1950s.
The decor was unmistakably vintage checkered floors, chrome accents, and patrons dressed in mid-century fashion. Jack squeezed Emma's hand, his eyes wide with disbelief. They exchanged looks of fear and confusion, their honeymoon turning into a surreal nightmare. Trying to remain calm, they approached a waiter and asked, "What is going on here?" The waiter, looking puzzled, replied, "Is everything all right, sir? It's just another beautiful evening in 1954.
Emma's heart pounded as she clung to Jack. "This can't be happening," she whispered, her voice trembling. The realization that they were truly out of their time hit them hard. They frantically searched for an exit, their dream honeymoon morphing into a living horror.
The atmosphere grew thick with tension. The couple could feel the stares of the other diners, could hear the whispers and murmurs. Just as their panic peaked, the scene dissolved, and they were back in the dimly lit hallway of the modern hotel. Shaken and exhausted, they returned to their room, the joyous start to their marriage now overshadowed by an inexplicable terror. They held each other close, the memory of their time slip haunting them, a dark cloud over their once bright future. But their love endured, stronger for having faced the unknown together. And as they would later recount, their bond was forged in the fires of an experience that defied logic and transcended time. Emma and Jack's story adds another layer to the enigma of the Ritz-Carlton. Each tale is a piece of a puzzle, a glimpse into the past that continues to shape the present. Stay with us, listeners, as we uncover more mysteries in the heart of Boston's most haunted hotel. Our next account takes us to the experience of Mrs. Eleanor Watson, an elderly woman with a fondness for nostalgia and a deep connection to the past. Eleanor checked into the Ritz-Carlton, hoping to relive the elegance of her youth. She wandered the halls, reminiscing about days gone by, when she and her late husband would visit grand hotels like this one. One evening, as she sat in the lobby, she noticed something strange. The lighting seemed to dim, and the modern decor began to fade. The sounds of the present melted away, replaced by the soft hum of a bygone era.
Eleanor stood, her heart pounding, as she realized she was no longer in the present. The lobby had transformed into a scene from the 1970s. She saw familiar faces, people she hadn't seen in decades, and her surroundings felt eerily like a vivid dream.
Tears welled up in her eyes as she saw her younger self and her late husband dancing in the middle of the room. The bittersweet vision filled her with longing and sorrow, a painful reminder of what she had lost. She approached a couple, hoping for answers. "Excuse me, but what year is it?" she asked, her voice shaking. They smiled and replied, "It's 1973, dear. Are you all right?" The couple's casual response confirmed her fear. Eleanor was truly experiencing a time slip. She wandered through the lobby, absorbing every detail, every memory that came rushing back to her. The moment was beautiful and heartbreaking all at once. She saw friends, long since past, and places that no longer existed. The weight of the past bore down on her, and she felt an overwhelming sadness.
Just as suddenly as it began, the vision started to fade. Eleanor found herself back in the modern lobby, the vivid colors and familiar faces dissolving into the present. She stood there, trembling, the emotional impacts leaving her breathless.
Despite the sorrow, Eleanor found a sense of peace. The experience, though brief, gave her a chance to say goodbye, to relive the happiest moments of her life. She carried that with her, a reminder that love and memories transcend time. Eleanor's story adds yet another poignant chapter to the mysteries of the Ritz-Carlton. Each time slip is a window into another world, another life, offering a glimpse of the past that lingers in the present. Join us as we continue to uncover the enigmatic tales that reside within these historic walls. Our next tale introduces Dr. Alan Marshall, a renowned skeptic and historian who checked into the Ritz-Carlton with one goal in mind: to debunk the so-called time slip phenomena. Dr. Marshall was determined to expose what he believed to be elaborate hoaxes. Armed with his knowledge and a dismissive attitude, he scoffed at the tales told by previous guests. One evening, after a long day of research, he decided to take a stroll through the hotel. As he walked the corridors, he muttered to himself, "Ghost stories and time travel. What a load of nonsense."
But then it happened. The air around him grew thick, the lights dimmed, and the sounds of the present faded away. Suddenly, Dr. Marshall found himself in the early 1900s. The hotel transformed into its former glory.
His heart raced with a mix of fear and anger. "This can't be real," he shouted, his voice echoing through the grand hall. He stormed through the hotel, demanding answers, convinced that someone was playing a trick on him.
The more he searched, the more desperate he became. The staff and guests, dressed in period attire, stared at him with puzzled expressions. His fury turned to terror as he realized he was truly out of his time, trapped in an era he had only read about.
He approached a man at the front desk and demanded, "What year is this?" The man calmly replied, "It's 1905, sir. Is there something the matter?"
Dr. Marshall's face paled. The weight of the situation crushed him, his skepticism shattered. He stumbled back, his mind racing to comprehend the impossible.
Just as quickly as it began, the time slip ended. Dr. Marshall found himself back in the present, the modern lobby quiet and still. He was trembling, his breath shallow, unable to reconcile what he had just experienced. The experience left him a broken man. His arrogance and certainty had been stripped away, replaced by a haunting fear and a sense of vulnerability. He never spoke of it again, the memory too painful to confront. Yet, his story serves as a powerful reminder. The unknown holds mysteries that challenge our understanding and humility. Dr. Marshall's journey from skeptic to believer is a testament to the inexplicable wonders of the Ritz-Carlton. Stay with us, listeners, as we delve deeper into the enigmatic time slips that continue to haunt this historic hotel. Each story uncovers a new layer of mystery, blurring the lines between past and present, reality and imagination. Our final chapter brings us to the unsung witnesses of the Ritz-Carlton's strange occurrences, the hotel staff. Those who work within these walls have their own stories to tell, stories that reveal yet another facet of this timeless mystery. For years, The staff at the Ritz-Carlton have whispered among themselves about the odd behaviors of certain guests, the ones who emerge from their rooms wide-eyed and trembling, speaking of places and people from another time.
One night, a young bellboy named Samuel was on his usual rounds when he saw a guest, an older gentleman, wandering the halls, his face pale with fear. "Excuse me, sir," Samuel called out. The man turned, his eyes filled with dread. "What year is it?" he asked, his voice shaking.
Samuel's blood ran cold. He had heard tales of these encounters, but had never witnessed one himself. "It's 2024, sir," he replied, his voice unsteady. The man looked around, disoriented, before whispering, "I was just in 1912. The stories among the staff vary." A maid named Rosa spoke of finding rooms in disarray, as if caught in the aftermath of a grand party from decades past. "It's as if the past seeps through the walls," she said, her voice tinged with fear. An older concierge, Mr. Davis, shared a particularly poignant tale. He spoke of a woman who had appeared in the lobby, dressed in mourning clothes from the Victorian era. She was weeping, asking for her husband, he recalled, his eyes reflecting the sorrow of that encounter. "She vanished before we could help her."
These encounters leave the staff shaken, their rational minds struggling to make sense of the inexplicable. Each incident adds to the growing fear that the Ritz-Carlton is not just a hotel, but a gateway to other times.
Some staff members, frustrated and fearful, have demanded answers from the hotel management. "What is happening here?" they asked, their voices edged with anger. But no explanation has ever been given, no official acknowledgement of the strange phenomena. Yet, amidst the fear and confusion, there is a sense of awe. The staff, though frightened, feel part of something much larger than themselves. They are the guardians of the hotel's secrets, witnesses to its extraordinary nature. And so, the Ritz-Carlton continues to stand a beacon of history and mystery. The staff, the guests, the very walls themselves, they all tell a story that transcends time. As we conclude this chapter, remember that some places are more than just locations. They are vessels of memories, bridges between the past and the present. The Ritz-Carlton is one such place, a timeless enigma that invites us to explore the boundaries of our understanding. In this final chapter, we turn our attention to those who sought to uncover the truth behind the time slips of the Ritz-Carlton. Among them was a team of paranormal investigators led by Dr. Elizabeth Harper, a respected parapsychologist. Dr. Harper and her team arrived at the hotel armed with the latest technology, skeptical yet intrigued by the stories they had heard. "We're here to find answers," she assured the staff, her voice calm and confident.
The first night of their investigation began uneventfully, with the team setting up equipment and conducting initial readings. But as the clock struck midnight, a palpable change swept through the air. The team's instruments went haywire, and an unsettling silence fell over the hotel.
Dr. Harper ventured into the grand ballroom, where she had heard reports of frequent time slips. The air grew thick with tension, and the room seemed to pulsate with an otherworldly energy. As she stood in the center of the ballroom, she felt a sudden chill. Her surroundings blurred, and she found herself transported to a lavish party in the 1920s. The guests, oblivious to her presence, danced and laughed under the glow of antique chandeliers.
Dr. Harper's heart raced. She struggled to stay calm, knowing she had to document this experience. But the longer she remained, the more intense her fear grew. The laughter around her sounded distorted, almost sinister.
She pulled out her recorder, her hands shaking, and began to speak. "This is Dr. Elizabeth Harper. I am in what appears to be the Ritz-Carlton ballroom, but it is the 1920s. This is not a hallucination. I am truly here. Suddenly, a man in a tuxedo approached her, his expression furious. You don't belong here, he hissed, his eyes burning with anger. Leave now or suffer the consequences.
Panic surged through Dr. Harper. She stumbled back, her mind racing to find a way out. The man's eyes followed her every move, his presence menacing and real. Just as she thought she would be trapped forever, the scene dissolved, and she was back in the modern ballroom, gasping for breath.
Dr. Harper's experience left her shaken but resolute. She had witnessed the inexplicable and survived to tell the tale. She knew she had to share her findings, despite the fear and skepticism they might provoke. Returning to her team, she recounted her experience with unwavering conviction. The time slips are real, she declared, and they are more dangerous than we ever imagined. We must continue our investigation, not just to understand, but to protect others from these phenomena. Despite her determination, Dr. Harper's encounter haunted her. The fear in the man's eyes, the palpable sense of danger, it all lingered, a dark shadow over her thoughts. She couldn't shake the feeling that she had narrowly escaped a terrible fate. The team continued their investigation, documenting numerous other encounters, each one more baffling than the last. Their work brought them no closer to understanding the time slips, but it solidified their belief in the supernatural forces at play. And so, the Ritz-Carlton remains a place of mystery, a nexus of time where the past and present collide. Dr. Harper's story, like those before her, reminds us that the world is full of wonders and terrors beyond our comprehension. As we conclude this series, remember that the unknown is always with us, lurking just beyond the veil of reality. The Ritz-Carlton Hotel stands as a testament to this, its walls echoing with the whispers of time. Tonight, we bring you the final chapter in our chilling saga of the Ritz-Carlton Hotel. This story, more recent and deeply disturbing, involves a young writer named Claire Thompson, who came seeking inspiration and left with a haunting experience that would change her forever. Claire had always been fascinated by the paranormal. She believed that the eerie tales surrounding the Ritz-Carlton would provide the perfect backdrop for her next novel. Little did she know, she would become a part of the story she intended to write.
On her second night, Claire was awoken by a cold breeze sweeping through her room. Shivering, she got out of bed and noticed the door to her balcony was ajar. With growing apprehension, she stepped outside, hoping to close it. Instead, she found herself gazing upon a bustling street from the 1800s.
The scene was so vivid, so detailed, that it took Claire a moment to realize she was no longer in her time. Horse-drawn carriages clattered along the cobblestone street, and gas lamps flickered in the night. Panic set in as she struggled to understand what was happening.
She turned to go back inside, but the door was gone. In its place was a solid brick wall. Trapped, Claire felt her breath quicken, her heart pounding in her chest. She was utterly alone in a time she didn't belong.
Desperation overtook her. She wandered the streets, calling out for help, but the people she encountered either ignored her or looked through her as if she were a ghost. The feeling of isolation was overwhelming, and tears streamed down her face as she realized the gravity of her situation. After hours of wandering, Claire's fear turned to anger. "Why is this happening to me?" she shouted into the night, her voice echoing through the empty streets. "What do you want from me?" But there was no answer, only the cold wind and the distant sound of laughter from another era.
Suddenly, a figure emerged from the shadows, a man dressed in old-fashioned clothing, his eyes wide with terror. "You must leave now," he warned, his voice trembling. "The longer you stay, the harder it is to return.
Claire's pulse raced. She begged the man to help her, but he only shook his head. "Find the mirror," he said cryptically. "It's the only way back." Before she could ask more, he vanished into the night, leaving her alone once again, determined to escape. Claire searched frantically for the mirror the man had mentioned. Hours felt like days as she scoured the unfamiliar streets, her hope dwindling with each passing moment.
Just when she was about to give up, she stumbled upon an antique shop. In the window, she saw it a large, ornate mirror. With renewed urgency, she rushed inside and stood before the mirror, her reflection pale and frightened.
Taking a deep breath, she touched the glass. Instantly, she felt a jolt as if pulled by an unseen force. The world around her swirled and blurred, and she closed her eyes, praying she would return to her time.
When she opened her eyes, Claire found herself back in her room at the Ritz-Carlton, the early morning light filtering through the curtains. She fell to her knees, tears of relief streaming down her face. She was home.
Claire left the Ritz-Carlton that day, her heart heavy with the weight of her experience. She had come seeking inspiration and found a nightmare. Yet, from that darkness, she drew strength and a deeper understanding of the mysteries that lie beyond our comprehension.
Her story, like the others, serves as a reminder of the thin veil separating our reality from the unknown. The Ritz-Carlton remains a place where the past and present intertwine, a beacon for those brave enough to explore its secrets.
Our next tale takes us deeper into the heart of the Ritz-Carlton, into a room that many have claimed is haunted by shadows of the past. This story revolves around a young couple, Emily and Michael, who checked in for a romantic getaway, only to find themselves entangled in a web of fear and uncertainty. Emily and Michael were excited to spend a weekend away from the hustle and bustle of their daily lives. They had heard of the hotel's grand history, but dismissed the ghost stories as mere legends. Their suite was luxurious, with a breathtaking view of the city. Everything seemed perfect until the second night.
As they prepared for bed, Emily noticed a strange shadow in the corner of the room. At first, she thought it was just a trick of the light, but the shadow seemed to move independently, growing darker and more defined.
Michael tried to reassure her, but he too felt a chill in the air, an unsettling presence that made the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. They decided to ignore it, hoping it was just their imagination playing tricks.
But as the night wore on, the shadow grew larger, creeping along the walls and floor. It seemed to pulse with a life of its own, and a low whispering filled the room. Emily clung to Michael, her fear palpable. "What is that?" she whispered, her voice trembling.
Michael held her close, trying to stay brave. "I don't know," he admitted, his voice heavy with dread. They huddled together under the covers, too afraid to move. As the whispers grew louder, more insistent, the night stretched on, the atmosphere thick with tension. The couple felt trapped, as if the room itself were alive and intent on consuming them. Every creak and groan of the old building seemed amplified, each sound a new source of terror. Frustrated and scared, Michael finally got out of bed. "This is ridiculous," he said, his voice shaking with anger. "It's just shadows and noise." He walked over to the light switch, determined to banish the darkness.
But as he reached for the switch, a cold, unseen hand grasped his wrist. Michael froze, his breath catching in his throat. The shadow loomed closer, the whispers now a cacophony of ghostly voices.
Emily screamed, breaking the paralysis that held Michael. He yanked his hand free and flipped the switch, flooding the room with light. The shadow vanished instantly, the whispers silenced. They were alone again, but the fear lingered. The rest of the night was sleepless. Emily and Michael stayed awake, holding each other, too afraid to close their eyes. By morning, they were exhausted. Their romantic getaway turned into a nightmare. They checked out early, vowing never to return. Their experience left them shaken, but it also brought them closer, a shared ordeal that strengthened their bond. They realized that some places are not meant to be understood, their mysteries left untouched. The Room of Shadows remains one of the most infamous in the Ritz-Carlton, a place where the past and present intertwine in eerie and inexplicable ways. Those who dare to stay there often leave with tales of fear and wonder, their lives forever changed by what they encountered. In this chapter, we delve into the strange occurrences surrounding a figure known to many guests and staff as the Phantom Bellhop. This ghostly presence has been reported by numerous visitors, always seen but never fully understood. It began one evening when a guest named Linda checked into the Ritz-Carlton. Exhausted from her travels, she was relieved when a bellhop promptly appeared to assist her with her luggage. Dressed in an old-fashioned uniform, he was polite and efficient. Linda noticed something peculiar about him. His eyes were somber, filled with a sadness that seemed to transcend time. She wanted to ask him if he was all right, but before she could, he vanished around the corner, leaving her feeling oddly melancholic.
Later that night, Linda awoke to the sound of soft knocking on her door. She opened it to find the same bellhop standing there, his face pale and expressionless. "May I help you?" she asked, her voice trembling. He simply stared at her, then turned and walked away without a word.
Confused and a little frightened, Linda decided to follow him. She trailed behind as he moved through the halls, his figure flickering like a shadow. He led her to the grand staircase, then stopped abruptly at the top step.
The bellhop turned to face her, his eyes now filled with a deep, unsettling sorrow. "Please help me," he whispered, his voice echoing with a haunting resonance. Before Linda could respond, he disappeared, leaving her alone and trembling on the staircase.
The next morning, Linda recounted her experience to the hotel staff. They listened with sympathetic ears, then shared with her the legend of the Phantom Bellhop, a young man who had worked at the hotel in the 1920s and had tragically fallen to his death from the very staircase where he had vanished. Linda's encounter was not unique. Many guests over the years have reported similar experiences with the Phantom Bellhop. Some say he appears to assist them, while others feel his presence as a cry for help from beyond the grave. There are those among the staff who feel frustrated and helpless, unable to assist this lost soul. "We can't just ignore it," one employee remarked angrily. "We need to find a way to help him find peace." Despite the fear and sadness surrounding the Phantom Bellhop, there is a sense of compassion and determination among those who have encountered him. They are driven by a desire to understand and to bring closure to this lingering spirit. The Ritz-Carlton continues to be a place where the past and present intertwine, where stories of the supernatural are part of its rich tapestry. The Phantom Bellhop remains a poignant reminder of the human stories that shape these walls. Tonight, we step into the opulent ballroom of the Ritz-Carlton, a place where elegance and luxury mask an unsettling presence. This story revolves around a grand celebration that turned into a night of terror for one unsuspecting guest. It was a night to remember. The Ritz-Carlton was hosting a lavish gala, attended by the city's elite. Among the guests was a young woman named Sarah, who had been looking forward to this event for months. She wore a stunning dress, feeling like a princess in a fairy tale. As the evening progressed, Sarah found herself drawn to the grand ballroom. The room was magnificent, with crystal chandeliers casting a warm glow and a live orchestra playing enchanting melodies. It was everything she had dreamed of, but as the clock struck midnight, the atmosphere shifted. The music became distorted, and the lights flickered ominously. Sarah looked around, noticing that the once lively crowd had become eerily silent, their faces blank and expressionless. Panic set in as Sarah tried to make her way to the exit, but the room seemed to warp and stretch, the doors impossibly far away. She felt a cold hand on her shoulder and turned to see a man dressed in an old-fashioned tuxedo, his eyes hollow and dark. "Please help me," the man whispered, his voice filled with despair. "I've been trapped here for so long." Sarah's heart ached for him, but she was terrified, unsure of what to do. The man's grip tightened, and the room grew colder. Shadows danced around them, and Sarah felt a suffocating dread. She pulled away, running towards the exit, her breath coming in short, desperate gasps. As she reached the door, she glanced back and saw the ballroom transform. The once grand space was now a decayed, abandoned hall, filled with the ghosts of past revelers. The man in the tuxedo stood in the center, his eyes pleading, surrounded by silent, spectral dancers. Sarah escaped into the night, tears streaming down her face. She felt a profound sadness for the souls trapped in the ballroom. Their joy turned to sorrow, their celebration into a haunting. In the days that followed, Sarah sought answers. She returned to the hotel, demanding to know the truth about the ballroom. The staff, sympathetic yet powerless, revealed the dark history of fire in the early 1900s that had claimed many lives during a gala. The spirits of that tragic night remained, replaying their final moments, unable to move on. Sarah's encounter was not the first, and it wouldn't be the last. The silent ballroom continued to be a place where the past lingered, a haunting reminder of lives lost too soon. Sarah's experience changed her. She became an advocate for preserving the history of such places, ensuring that the stories of those who came before were remembered and honored. She believed that acknowledging the past could help heal the present. As we close this chapter, we reflect on the silent ballroom and the eerie beauty of the Ritz-Carlton. It is a place where the veil between worlds is thin, where echoes of the past still resonate in the present. Tonight, we recount a chilling tale from the Ritz-Carlton that involves the innocent laughter of a child, turning into an echo of fear. This story centers around a family who stayed at the hotel, unaware of the eerie mystery they would encounter. The Harris family, consisting of parents Tom and Linda, and their young daughter, Emily, checked into the Ritz-Carlton for a weekend getaway. They were looking forward to exploring the city and enjoying the luxurious amenities of the hotel. Emily was a bright and curious child, full of energy and wonder. She was particularly excited about the indoor pool, where she spent hours playing and splashing around. Her laughter echoed through the halls, a sound that brought smiles to everyone who heard it. But one evening, as Tom and Linda were getting ready for dinner, Emily went missing. She had been playing in the hallway, her giggles filling the air, and then silence. They called her name, their voices tinged with panic, but there was no response. Tom and Linda frantically searched the hotel, enlisting the help of the staff. They combed through every floor, every room, but Emily was nowhere to be found. Desperation set in as the minutes turned to hours. Linda was on the verge of tears, her heart breaking with every passing moment. Where could she be? She sobbed, clinging to Tom for support. He tried to stay strong, but the fear in his eyes was unmistakable. Then, late at night, they heard Emily's laughter, faint and distant, coming from the old service elevator that hadn't been in use for decades. The elevator door, rusty and creaky, stood ajar, an ominous portal to an unknown place. Against the advice of the staff, Tom and Linda ventured into the depths of the hotel, following the sound of their daughter's laughter. The path led them to a forgotten section of the building, a place that seemed to belong to another time. Tom, his voice shaking with anger and fear, shouted, "Emily, where are you?" But the only response was the echo of her laughter, now tinged with an eerie, otherworldly quality. They entered a room that seemed frozen in time, filled with old toys and furniture covered in dust. In the center of the room stood Emily, her back turned to them. Relief washed over them, but as they approached, she vanished before their eyes, leaving behind only a chilling whisper of her giggle. Linda fell to her knees, sobbing uncontrollably. "This can't be real," she cried. "We have to find her. We can't leave without her." Tom held her, his own tears flowing, feeling helpless and shattered. The Harris family never found Emily. Despite exhaustive searches and investigations, she remained a ghostly presence within the hotel, her laughter occasionally heard by other guests, a haunting reminder of a lost child. Though their story ended in sorrow, it brought to light the importance of remembering and honoring those who have vanished. The Ritz-Carlton now holds a special place in its heart for Emily, her spirit woven into its history, a symbol of innocence and the mysteries that lie beyond our understanding. As we close this chapter, we ponder the fragile boundary between our world and the unknown. The vanishing of Emily Harris is a poignant reminder of the love that persists beyond the veil, and the echoes that continue to haunt the halls of the Ritz-Carlton. In this chapter, we venture into one of the most infamous rooms of the Ritz-Carlton, a suite known for its luxurious amenities and its chilling secrets. This tale follows a businessman named Richard, who checked into the haunted suite for a quiet night, only to find himself entangled in a web of fear and uncertainty. Richard arrived at the Ritz-Carlton late one evening, exhausted from a long day of meetings. The concierge, with a knowing look, handed him the key to one of the hotel's finest suites. "Enjoy your stay, Mr. Thompson," he said with a polite smile. Richard was too tired to notice the hint of apprehension in the concierge's eyes. The suite was everything Richard had hoped for: elegant, spacious, and impeccably decorated. He quickly settled in, looking forward to a restful night. Little did he know, the room had other plans. As midnight approached, Richard was jolted awake by the sound of footsteps echoing through the suite. He sat up, heart pounding, straining to listen. The footsteps grew louder, closer, until they stopped just outside his bedroom door. Richard, trying to shake off the fear, convinced himself it was just his imagination. He lay back down, but sleep eluded him. Moments later, the footsteps resumed, this time accompanied by a faint, mournful whisper. He got out of bed and cautiously opened the door, peering into the dark hallway. It was empty. The whispers continued, growing more insistent, filling the air with an eerie chill. "Who's there?" Richard called out, his voice trembling. The only response was a soft sobbing, a sound that tugged at his heart. He followed the sound, his apprehension growing with each step. It led him to the living room, where a shadowy figure stood by the window, looking out into the night. the figure turned to face him, revealing a woman in an old-fashioned gown, her eyes filled with sorrow. "Please help me," she whispered, her voice breaking. Richard felt a wave of empathy, his fear momentarily forgotten. "Who are you?" he asked gently, stepping closer. The woman shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "I am lost," she replied. "Trapped here for eternity. Can you help me find peace?" Before Richard could respond, the woman vanished, leaving behind a lingering sadness. The room fell silent, but the air was heavy with an unspoken sorrow. Richard spent the rest of the night sitting by the window, unable to shake the feeling of despair that had enveloped the suite. The next morning, Richard confronted the concierge. "Why didn't you warn me about the room?" he demanded, his voice tinged with anger. The concierge sighed, looking both guilty and resigned. "The suite has a history," he admitted. "Many guests have reported similar experiences. We've tried to help her, but she remains, forever searching for peace." Richard left the Ritz-Carlton with a heavy heart, but also a newfound determination. He spent months researching the hotel's history, uncovering the tragic story of the woman in the suite. He shared her story with the world, hoping to bring her the peace she sought. The haunted suite remains a place of mystery and sorrow, a testament to the enduring power of love and loss. Richard's experience serves as a reminder that some spirits linger, bound by the emotions that define their lives. Tonight, we explore the chilling tale of the ghostly musician of the Ritz-Carlton, whose haunting melodies continue to echo through the hotel's grand halls. This story centers around a couple, Mark and Julia, who experienced the unexplainable during their romantic getaway. Mark and Julia arrived at the Ritz-Carlton, eager to celebrate their anniversary in style. They were enchanted by the hotel's elegance and looked forward to an unforgettable weekend. On their first evening, they decided to dine in the hotel's lavish restaurant. The ambience was perfect. Soft lighting, exquisite decor, and a talented pianist playing beautiful classical music set the mood. Mark and Julia felt like they had stepped into a dream. But as the night wore on, Julia noticed something strange. The music seemed to take on a life of its own, becoming more melancholic and eerie. The pianist, who had been playing with passion, now appeared distant and detached, his eyes staring blankly ahead. Julia whispered to Mark, "Do you hear that? The music. It's different." Mark nodded, feeling a growing unease. They decided to leave the restaurant, hoping to escape the unsettling atmosphere. As they walked through the empty halls of the hotel, the haunting melody followed them, growing louder and more distorted. Julia clutched Mark's arm, her heart racing. "What's happening?" she asked, her voice trembling. They hurried to the elevator, but when the doors opened, they were greeted by a chilling sight: the pianist from the restaurant, his fingers moving across invisible keys, playing the same haunting tune. His eyes were hollow, and his expression was one of profound sorrow. "Please help me," the pianist whispered, his voice barely audible over the ghostly music. "I am trapped in this endless performance, unable to find rest." Mark and Julia exchanged a glance, their fear mingled with compassion. "How can we help you?" Mark asked, stepping closer. The pianist looked at them, hope flickering in his eyes for the first time. "Find my music," he replied. "It holds the key to my freedom. It was lost long ago, and without it, I cannot leave this place." Determined to help, Mark and Julia began their search, delving into the hotel's history and speaking with staff and other guests. They learned that the pianist had been a renowned musician in the early 1900s, who had tragically died during a performance at the hotel. The music had disappeared with him, and his spirit had remained bound to the hotel, endlessly replaying his final performance.
Mark and Julia scoured the archives and old storage rooms, guided by the haunting melodies that seemed to lead them.
Frustration set in as days passed with no sign of the missing music. "We have to find it," Julia exclaimed, her voice filled with anger and desperation. "We can't let him suffer like this." Finally, in a forgotten corner of the hotel's basement, they discovered an old, dusty manuscript, the lost music of the ghostly musician. With trembling hands, they brought it back to the grand piano in the lobby. As they placed the manuscript on the piano, the ghostly figure of the pianist appeared, his expression one of gratitude and relief. He began to play, the haunting melody transforming into a beautiful, uplifting piece. With the final note, the pianist smiled and slowly faded away, his spirit finally at peace. The Ritz-Carlton was filled with a sense of calm and closure, the haunting melodies replaced by a tranquil silence. Mark and Julia's act of kindness had freed the ghostly musician, reminding us of the power of compassion and the enduring connections between the living and the dead. As we close this chapter, we reflect on the mysteries that lie within the walls of the Ritz-Carlton and the souls that find peace through the actions of others. Tonight, we delve into the unsettling tale of a mirror in the Ritz-Carlton that holds more than just reflections. This story follows a woman named Laura who checked into the hotel for a business trip, only to discover the chilling secrets hidden within her suite. Laura arrived at the Ritz-Carlton after a long day of meetings. She was looking forward to a quiet night and a good night's sleep. Her room was elegantly furnished, with a large ornate mirror hanging on the wall opposite the bed. The mirror was beautiful, an antique piece that added a touch of sophistication to the room. Laura admired its craftsmanship, but as the night wore on, she began to feel an uneasy presence emanating from it.
As she prepared for bed, Laura caught a glimpse of something in the mirror that made her blood run cold. For a split second, she saw a figure standing behind her, an indistinct, shadowy form that vanished as soon as she turned around.
She tried to shake off the fear, telling herself it was just her imagination. But as she lay in bed, she couldn't help but feel as though she was being watched. The room grew colder, and the silence was broken only by the faintest whispers that seemed to come from the mirror.
Laura's heart pounded in her chest. She got up and approached the mirror, her reflection staring back at her with wide, fearful eyes. "Is anyone there?" she whispered, her voice trembling.
The room remained silent, but as she turned to walk away, the whispers grew louder, more insistent. She glanced back at the mirror and saw the figure again, clearer this time, a woman in an old-fashioned dress, her face twisted in sorrow and despair. "Help me," the woman in the mirror mouthed, her eyes pleading. Laura felt a wave of sadness wash over her. She reached out to touch the glass, feeling a cold, unnatural chill. Determined to understand what was happening, Laura did some research the next morning. She learned that the mirror had once belonged to a wealthy socialite who had stayed at the Ritz-Carlton in the 1920s. The woman had tragically taken her own life in that very room, and her spirit was said to be trapped in the mirror ever since.
At night, Laura decided to confront the spirit. She sat in front of the mirror, her heart racing. "What do you want from me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper.
The figure appeared once more, her eyes filled with an unspoken plea. "Free me," she whispered, her voice echoing in Laura's mind. "I am bound to this mirror, reliving my sorrow over and over. Help me find peace." Laura felt tears welling up in her eyes. "How can I help you?" she asked, her voice breaking. The woman in the mirror reached out, and for a moment, their hands seemed to touch through the glass. Laura realized what she needed to do. She contacted a local historian and a spiritual medium, hoping to find a way to release the trapped spirit. They conducted a ritual in the room, surrounding the mirror with candles and reciting incantations to cleanse it. As the ritual progressed, the room filled with a warm, soothing light. The figure in the mirror smiled for the first time, her expression one of gratitude and relief. "Thank you," she whispered, before fading away, leaving the mirror clear and empty. Laura felt a profound sense of peace wash over her. The room, once filled with an oppressive presence, was now calm and serene. She had helped a lost soul find rest, and in doing so had uncovered a hidden part of the hotel's history. As we close this chapter, we reflect on the power of compassion and the importance of helping those who are bound by their past. The mirror at the Ritz-Carlton now stands as a symbol of redemption and the enduring connections between our world and the next. Tonight, we uncover the eerie tale of the phantom bellhop of the Ritz-Carlton, a spectral presence known to assist guests with their luggage, but at a chilling cost. This story follows a businessman named David, whose late-night arrival turned into an unforgettable encounter. David arrived at the Ritz-Carlton late on a stormy night, exhausted from a day filled with travel delays. The lobby was quiet, almost deserted, as he approached the front desk. The concierge welcomed him warmly and handed over his room key. As David turned to head to the elevator, a young bellhop appeared seemingly out of nowhere. He wore a crisp uniform, complete with a cap, and offered to take David's bags. "Welcome to the Ritz-Carlton, sir. Allow me to assist you," the bellhop said with a polite smile.
David hesitated, something about the bellhop's appearance striking him as odd, but he was too tired to refuse. "Sure, thanks," he replied, handing over his bags.
The elevator ride was uneventful, but David couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The bellhop stood silently, his eyes fixed straight ahead. When they reached David's floor, the bellhop led him to his room and set the bags down. "Good night, sir," the bellhop said softly, his voice tinged with a strange sadness. As David offered a tip, the bellhop shook his head. "No need, sir, just beware the shadows." David felt a chill run down his spine as the bellhop disappeared down the hallway. He entered his room, trying to dismiss the unease. But as he settled in, the words of the bellhop echoed in his mind.
That night, David was awakened by a strange noise. He sat up, heart pounding, listening to the faint sound of whispering coming from the hallway. He got up and opened the door, peering into the dimly lit corridor.
The hallway was empty, but the whispers grew louder, more insistent. David stepped out, following the sound, and found himself standing before a door at the end of the hall. The whisper seemed to be coming from inside.
As he reached for the doorknob, a cold hand grabbed his shoulder. David spun around to see the bellhop standing there, his eyes filled with fear. "You mustn't go in there," the bellhop whispered urgently. "The shadows, they consume all who enter."
David stepped back, his fear growing. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice shaking. The bellhop looked down, sadness washing over his face. "I am but a remnant of the past, a spirit bound to this place by a promise I could not keep." The bellhop explained that he had been working at the Ritz-Carlton decades ago when he failed to save a guest from a tragic accident. Since then, he had been trying to protect others from the same fate, doomed to roam the halls eternally. David felt a mix of fear and compassion. "How can I help you?" he asked. The bellhop looked at him with pleading eyes. "Find the old records, the truth of what happened. Only then can my spirit be freed."
Determined to help, David spent the next day searching the hotel archives. He discovered the tragic story of a guest who had died in the very room he was staying in, and the bellhop who had tried in vain to save him.
With the information in hand, David returned to the room at the end of the hall. He placed the old records at the door and recited a prayer for the lost souls. The air grew still and the whispers ceased. The bellhop appeared one last time, a look of gratitude on his face. "Thank you," he said, his voice filled with relief. "You have given me the peace I sought for so long." With that, he slowly faded away, his spirit finally at rest. David felt a profound sense of calm as he returned to his room. The shadows that once haunted the hallway were gone, replaced by a tranquil silence. He had helped to free a trapped soul, and in doing so uncovered a piece of the hotel's hidden past. As we close this chapter, we reflect on the power of compassion and the importance of uncovering the truths that bind us. The phantom bellhop of the Ritz-Carlton now serves as a reminder of the enduring connections between the living and the spirits that linger. Tonight, we delve into one of the most perplexing and chilling encounters reported at the Ritz-Carlton. This story involves a guest whose very presence seemed to defy the laws of reality. It was a crisp autumn evening when Jonathan Reed, an affluent businessman, arrived at the Ritz-Carlton. He had booked a suite, seeking both relaxation and an escape from the relentless pace of his daily life. Little did he know, his stay would become a haunting mystery.
On the second night of his stay, Jonathan noticed something strange. His room's temperature dropped abruptly, and a faint, eerie humming filled the air. He attempted to ignore it, attributing it to old pipes or an overactive imagination. But the feeling of unease only grew stronger.
By midnight, Jonathan was unable to sleep. He wandered the hallways, hoping to shake off the unsettling sensations. As he roamed, the hotel seemed eerily quiet, the usual hustle and bustle replaced by an oppressive silence.
He turned a corner and saw a figure at the end of the hallway. The figure was indistinct, shrouded in shadow, but Jonathan could make out the faint outline of a person dressed in old-fashioned clothing. The figure seemed to glide rather than walk, moving with an unnatural grace.
Feeling a mix of fear and curiosity, Jonathan approached the figure, hoping for an explanation. But as he got closer, the figure's face came into view, an elderly woman with a sorrowful expression. Her eyes, filled with a profound sadness, seemed to look right through him.
Jonathan tried to speak, but no sound came out. He reached out to touch her, but his hand passed through her form as if she were made of mist. The woman's gaze remained fixed on him, her expression pleading and tragic.
In a blink, the woman vanished. Jonathan stood alone in the hallway, his breath coming in ragged gasps. He felt an overwhelming sense of loss, as if the encounter had stolen something from him. The next morning, Jonathan was nowhere to be found. His belongings were still in his suite, but he had vanished without a trace. The hotel staff searched extensively, but found no sign of him. No clues as to where he had gone. Jonathan's disappearance remains one of the most baffling cases in the history of the Ritz-Carlton. His story is a haunting reminder of the mysteries that lie just beyond our understanding, the shadows that flicker at the edge of our reality. As we close this chapter, remember that the Ritz-Carlton, with its rich history and enigmatic past, holds secrets that defy explanation. The stories of those who have encountered the unknown remind us of the fragile boundary between the worlds we know and those we can only glimpse. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the mysteries of the Ritz-Carlton. Keep your curiosity alive, for in the unknown, we often find the most profound truths. Until next time, stay vigilant and keep exploring the shadows.